All right, we're going to remove what's known as a sealed hub rear wheel bearing. Okay, this is the rear of this 07 PT Cruiser. Okay, once the drum or the wheel's off, sorry, let's go ahead and get the drum. If it won't come off, we'll just give it a good smack. Oh, a little bit more is going to help us get it coming off straight, maybe. There we go. All right, the bearing is inside this little hub. Now some bearings are bolted on. You'll unbolt some things in the back and just pull them off, but this one here, you'll see the configuration. And it is a roller bearing. And I'll show you a little difference what that means here in a moment. To kind of walk the cap off. Try not to mangle it. I think we're getting looser and looser. Good. Once you get so far, the channel locks might be enough to finish the job. There we go. Alrighty. Now, good. This nut here is on pretty tight, but it's still a good idea. And I already did this previously to make the movie in my practice, but I staked the shaft here and I staked it here. In other words, I just got my hammer, made a little notch and a little notch. In the event you could never find a specification or you wanted to reassemble it, but I already looked at the spec. It's 160 foot-pounds is how tight this is. So it's not a tapered roller bearing, being that's the case. And this is what's known as a self-locking nut. Get this thing a little bit more. Gotta get past the nylon resistance ring. Okay, meaning there's a little plastic or nylon washer or ring here that actually kind of helps seal around the thread, so this has resistance, it won't vibrate loose. Self-locking, one version of a self-locking nut. It's pretty easy from here. If you ever had a noisy wheel bearing, a rough one, on this car, you just take off a big nut and you pull off the whole hub assembly. Here's the bearing. Of course, it's sealed. Now inside, I don't know if we can see it in the camera now, there's some little rollers. And I got another bearing here, but
I'm bringing it a little closer to the camera.
yeah, I don't know if it's gonna show up or not, but I got another roller bearing here. Meaning this, it's got the ball bearings. Actually, it's a ball bearing. And this one here is pretty worn, but these little ball bearings. Now the nut was tightened against here. So that doesn't put any load on the rollers themselves. Unlike what's known as a tapered roller bearing. Now as a nut would push against this type of bearing, we can crush and put too much pressure on it. That's why we go through a process called preload, where in essence, the nut that goes on here really is only about finger tight, maybe just slightly tighter, and to hold the bearings in place but not have pressure. That, that would be again a preload procedure, and that's on tapered roller bearings. But if you're dealing with ball bearings or just plain roller bearings as well, flat rollers, not tapered, the nut, see, pushes against that inner race. So there's really no load on the rollers. That's why this has to be tightened pretty tight, 160 foot-pounds. Okay. So having demonstrated this, if you used to buy a new hub and wheel bearing, you just simply slide it back on, put the nut on, and of course spin this down, tighten it up with a torque wrench to 160 foot-pounds, at least on an 07 PT Cruiser. That's the specification.